Sonic's forever rival isn't Shadow the Hedgehog, it's not Knuckles the Echidna. Hell, it's not even Surge the Tinwreck, even though the IDW comics currently would have you believe she is. The Blue Blur's forever rival is the only robotic doppelganger of his to stand the test of time throughout the franchise's 33-year history. Why then has said doppelganger not amounted to anything more than a small nuisance that can be easily sideswiped and forgotten about time after time? The answer is simple. Metal Sonic was imbued with all the ego, insecurity, and narcissism of which his father possesses, but without the free will to decide when enough is enough, thus making him Eggman's greatest creation and greatest failure all in one shiny package. A rust bucket of potential that has seemingly been replaced with a vastly superior vessel, but this may be to his benefit. Metal is long overdue for a renaissance of his own, and we're gonna help him paint it. You ready? To understand where Metal Sonic is going, we'll have to quickly comprehend where he came from. Back in 1993, players were first introduced to the metal version of our hero in Sonic CD. As a new character to the lore, it was very apparent that our hunk of junk was no ordinary badnik. Not your Buzz Bomber, or Chompers, or even your Coconuts. This was an Eggman robot that had attitude, a mission to complete, and something to prove not only to his master, but somehow to himself. Racing Metal Sonic on Stardust Speedway felt like it meant something, because you couldn't win just by attacking him. You had to outrun the robot, show beyond doubt that you are the only fastest thing alive, and have him fall at the hands of the same person that created him. What makes this second interaction with Metal Sonic so interesting is that he doesn't simply rev up his engines and get ready for the race. He purposely copies Sonic's signature finger-wagging pose as if to taunt Sonic, and the player by extension, in a subtle yet effective attempt at emulating the Hedgehog that we've known at this point for about 2 years. Now, of course he loses, but that wouldn't be the end of Metal for a while. He went on to appear in a role of some sort in pretty much every subsequent game leading up to the 2000s. Sonic Triple Trouble, Sonic Drift 2, Knuckles Chaotix, Sonic the Fighters, and Sonic R. All of which have a story to them, but not one that particularly matters to Metal's character arc. Metal Sonic Kai was introduced in Knuckles Chaotix, and it's awesome though. But we'll get to know more about alternate versions a bit later. It wouldn't be until 1999 with the release of the Sonic the Hedgehog OVA where we finally get to see and know exactly how Metal Sonic views his place in the world. Being created as a one-for-one copy of Sonic due to his bio data being downloaded by an Eggman machine, Hyper Metal Sonic, as he's called in the OVA, is convinced that he himself is the true Hedgehog and kicks off his act as a constant annoyance throughout the latter half of the movie, or episodes as some people may refer to them as. This phenomena links the two beings together on a mental note, thus allowing us to get the infamous line,
"You might know everything I'm going to do, but that's not going to help you since I know everything you're going to do. Strange, isn't it?"
Aside from Metal putting up one of the better fights we've seen from him in almost any media he's been present in, what the OVA does to encapsulate his purpose for existing is put onto display in just one scene. Here, where after all the fighting is done and things look dire, Metal still refuses to accept a helping hand from an opponent that he feels doesn't deserve respect. This battle was for Sonic, a means to stop Eggman from yet another dastardly plot. But for Metal, it was a battle for his life, his ability to prove himself the best, his right to exist. This would be the defining moment for Metal Sonic, an attempt that has since been replicated with expectations of that same positive result, but failed time and time again. The next and last meaningful time we'd see our rust bucket in the games was Sonic Heroes. His overall role in this game isn't explored until you get to certain bits and pieces in the team's stories, and then you finally are exposition dumped in the last story where all is revealed. Metal has locked up Eggman, taken over his empire, and impersonates him, all to draw Sonic out and fight the Hedgehog to prove once and for all that he is the true Sonic. Sounds a bit familiar, doesn't it? As a Sonic Heroes enjoyer, the scheme is passable, but as a lore enthusiast, it falls flat. Metal gets this new form, arguably akin to Super Sonic, that he doesn't use, and then transforms into a kaiju that poses no real threat. You could argue that Team Sonic needed the Chaos Emeralds to take him down, but when every other team in the game is able to handle the pre-final transformation, you see what I'm getting at? Anywho, that's it for Metal. After this, he's relegated to side games, cameos, and boss fights that fill the role of because we needed a villain, or completely missing from the story. It feels as though Sonic Team had no idea what to do with the guy, but what if I told you that there's one saving grace? The comics. To hear one say that Metal has no personality is not incorrect. To hear one say that he's chock full of personality is also not incorrect. He walks this line of being the most intricate and deep character that the Sonic series has ever seen, But then you get weekly villain vibes from him in a lot of the issues as well. You see, Archie and IDW have done a great deal of work when it comes to trying their best to give this toaster the character arcs that he deserves. But then one thing or another gets in the way, and then his development goes to someone completely different. Metal is far from the first Eggman created robot or adjacent to go rogue and do their own thing. Famous examples include Gamma, Omega, technically Emerald as well, but there is one specific robo that has straight up given us what we want from Metal Sonic, and it's himself. I'd like to introduce you to Shard, the Metal Sonic from Sonic CD. For anyone not familiar with the Archie comics, here's the breakdown. There were often adaptations of the games that the company would do to bring the lores ever so slightly closer together. When the events of Archie's Sonic CD end, the comics versions of Knuckles Chaotix takes place sometime after, in which the aforementioned Metal Sonic Kai is successfully defeated, but not destroyed. Following this, the group would have one more run-in with the original CD Metal Sonic, who's been fully rebuilt and possesses new gadgets. The story progresses, and akin to the ending of the Sonic OVA, Metal Sonic chooses to allow his body to be destroyed. But something has changed this time. Metal actively selects to help Sonic and Tails escape by holding back the rising lava after developing a consciousness of his own, due to Tails of all people. Seeing that Tails in this instance was willing to stay with Sonic as the situation became more tense, awakened something in the robot. You'd think that this would be the official end to this version of Metal, but no. You see this little thing right here? That's called the Power Gem. All you need to know about this is, this Metal's consciousness was held inside of it, and seeing as it wasn't destroyed, was able to be recovered and put into a newly built body by Sonic's uncle, Charles. The robot, now named Shard, would go on to be part of the Secret Freedom Fighters, a group dedicated to doing what the regular Freedom Fighters would be ridiculed for. Shard spends his time trying to prove himself to be a hero, but since he can't make his good deeds known and resembles the fearsome foe that many of the Archie characters hate, Shard is stuck being between a rock and a hard place. He experiences what it means to be uncomfortable and misunderstood, but in that same breath, what it means to do something for purposes outside of yourself and atone for any past misdeeds in a manner that is true to you. I don't want to spoil exactly what happens in Shard's full story, so if you're looking for where to start the experience with his character, I'd recommend these Sonic Universe comic issues. Going back to the Metal Sonic that we all know and love, however, there are several characters who, on a multitude of occasions, have tried to get Metal to break free of Eggman's clutches, each one, however, failing every time they think a change is coming. Shadow in the Archie run after he's come to terms with the fact that you don't have to abide by what you were originally born to do, and Sonic in the IDW run where he's frustrated with Metal for going back to Eggman after finally being free due to the end of forces are just a couple of examples. Without fail though, he keeps going back to the source of his suffering, the overload of expectations, a mutual acceptance of abuse, and a tenacity to endure whatever losses may come his way, since tomorrow's always a new day to try to destroy the fake him. At what cost though, Metal? Since you've been replaced on a number of occasions, and with the most recent time, it may be your damnation and salvation, all in one. The key to free Metal Sonic from his shackles was brought to us just a little bit over 2 years ago with the release of Sonic Frontiers. For anyone not familiar, please be quickly acquainted with Sage, Eggman's newest AI companion and surrogate daughter. Although she too is a blind follower to Eggy, there is something different about her, much like the two robots I'd forewent mentioning, Orbot and Cubot. All these individuals, but Sage in particular, have had the luxury of being able to call out Eggman's literal holes in his plots and help devise an alternative solution to fix them. The creation of this AI daughter has seen her taking on a deuteragonist role in the last big mainline Sonic game, and it looks as if she'll be the newest right-hand man to Eggy in all titles going forward. Unlike Metal, Sage is willingly cordial with Sonic and seems to have a soft spot for him after their time together, but it is still shown that she would choose her father first and foremost when push comes to shove. What does this mean for Metal now? Well, the series can go one of two ways with this character. 1. Have Metal stay as another Eggman lackey and ultimately take a back seat as Sage will be at the forefront from now on. Or 2. Eggman allows Metal Sonic to go off on his own and discover whatever it is he feels is needed to find out who he wants to be. My vote is on the latter, since this would be the first time that Eggy has voluntarily allowed a robotic creation of his to go out on their own. The robots I mentioned back at the beginning all made the decision to liberate themselves from Eggman's programming, but by choosing to consciously decide to set Metal free, we'd see a moment of growth for both characters. Eggman knows what Metal wants, and currently sees the robot as a means to further his own plans. And Metal knows what Eggman wants, but doesn't mind being a conduit for whatever schemes he may be involved in if it gets him closer to finally destroying Sonic. Each individual will be forced to pursue their own goals on their own terms, thus eliminating this codependency that they have with one another. Metal shouldn't become a hero, or an anti-hero for that matter. He should become an entity that is allowed to work on himself and push his limits to their absolute max. His master has only ever offered temporary solutions to an everlasting problem. Failing to see the root cause of why Metal has never been successful in taking down Sonic is because there's too much of Eggman in him. Eggy's greatest creation is his greatest failure, a testament to how forcing someone to be like you leads to a destruction of character and individuality. Metal Sonic went from the coolest thing imaginable to this robotic shell of his former self, so I wanted to shine some light on that bright blue dome of his. We must ask though, what kind of role or character arc would you have Metal Sonic take on and go through, and why? If it were up to me, he'd be a round character to symbolize that even with his struggle to prove himself the real Sonic, he's capable of so much more. But before that, Metal would have to partake in one last Eggman tournament to truly display